Okay, so the Twiggs County Board of Education Public Budget Workshop is now called to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and the moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. You may be seated. Today is May 18th, 2020, and the time is 6:07 p.m. We have 4 of our board members present with our superintendent. We have myself, Chair Joni Rainey. We have Elgin Dixon, our superintendent. We have Teresa Blackshear. We have Mr. Mike Rouse, and then we have Mr. Harris. And Ms. Stokes is not here at this time. But if you will see the agenda that we have for this evening, and Mr. Dixon, is this the agenda here? So you have the agenda here, and this is solely for the purpose of our public workshop. There will be no action taken this evening. This is for information purposes only. And I entertain a motion from our board to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. This is May 18th, 2020, BOE called session.
Madam Chair, I make the motion to approve the agenda for tonight.
Second.
Motion has been made by Ms. Blackshear and seconded by Mr. Rouse to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. That motion carries unanimously. Okay. So at this time, we are going to have the business agenda, and that is the public workshop for our budget purposes.
Madam Chair, thank you all for coming out to our workshop this afternoon. At this time, we are going to begin with our budget workshop. As you know, we did experience a 14% statewide budget cut. So that does cause for us to rethink our budget, as we had a budget calendar that we were going through and planning for with this year. So at this time, we have done some things, and we have looked at some things, and that Mr. Austin and I and the team have looked at, and we will have asked Mr. Austin to come up and lead us through our presentation for tonight. And I think everyone should have a copy before you of some proposals that we have that we would like for you to just take under consideration, massage any questions that you might have, to ask those questions. And if any of our team members are sitting in the hallway, that will give 6 feet. If you can get in, that would be great. If not, you're there for listening, to provide insight if there's any needed. So at this time, we're going to provide some historical data for you as well, and I will be interjecting from time to time, but we will go forward now.
All right, good evening, board members, board chair, vice chair, Mr. Dixon, superintendent, stakeholders. One of the prior board meetings that we had, we talked about through a memo that we could possibly see some drastic changes to our budgetary process because of funding. And so, unfortunately, those things have bad fruit and came true. And so we have seen that across the state that this impact is widespread and something that we are considering. And if we look at the next slide, one of the things that we took some time to do was create a few scenarios or options that we could possibly look at to decrease our deficit that's caused. So the way the calculation worked on the 14% or 15% that we did for extra padding was $609,941.40. This number was based upon our current year state QBE allotment that we have from the state, which is the last amount that we've had that the General Assembly has approved. So that's where our starting point is, and that's where the deficit came. In this particular option, we looked at millage increase, and this is something that we did not consider in this option. I do want to start out in saying that a lot of districts are doing a lot of different things, and we have considered the option that look and work best for Twiggs County in this particular fact. Calendar cut or a reduced calendar model of 3 days, which gives us a savings of $65,429.54. Operational cuts, which will be standard throughout all the options. And to explain what that may consist of, you may have salaries, consultants, contract agreements, anything that we do outside of paying an employee within particular functions will be under consideration under that category. As we look at salary allocation and attrition, we have probably our biggest saving, $386,000.
Mr. Austin, could we
Yes,
go
sir.
back to operational cuts? Because I think when we go to talking about operational cuts, that under operational cuts, that does also, operational cuts would involve, talk about the different programs that would fall up under operational cuts. Does that involve, that would involve superintendent's budget, that would involve operations budget, that would involve
Sure.
the different, could you talk about that? Because that involves travel, that involves professional learning, that involves.
Sure.
Could you give some examples of what's involved in that?
Yes, so in each function, for example, function 1000, which is our instructional function, 90% of that function is salaries. So we do not look at that as heavy as part of our operational costs because a lot of that does not consist of that. However, if you look at functions like the superintendent office, business and finance, school administration, M&O, transportation, we have a lot of travel that takes place in that. And part of this is, and that it also has dues and fees. So if you go, you have to get a hotel. And we looked at like, hey, you know, that was a big cost that we could be saving if we really minimize that particular aspect. Also within that, if you're going out places, 9 times 10 you're doing professional learning. So that's also an impact that happens that we also look at in that. If we had any consulting agreements for us people coming in, just contractor work, or if we had opportunities to provide expertise in certain areas, fortunately some of those were one-time things, meaning that they were only relevant for this particular fiscal year. And we're looking at that. Do we really need this person to come in or that group to come in and do any work for us? So that gives us an opportunity to look at those particular cuts in that. And as we move forward, some of the things, if we had looked at software and technological needs that we're not using as we should or that we should revisit, we also have the opportunity to look at items of that nature as well in the operational cuts.
And there may be, rather than a team going, maybe one person would go and redeliver to combat those kinds of things.
Yes. All right. Any comments around operational cuts? Because this will be relevant in each option, so I can take the time to elaborate further if I need to. All right.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
In reference to any of your operational cuts concerning technology software or what have you, whatever function it may be, if those opportunities that we have to cut them, are those opportunities to cut are the same recommendations that came before the board for approval, not necessarily. And I say that normally there's a dollar amount attached to, or a certain dollar amount attached to what the board approves. If it's up to how much money?
We haven't looked at a particular software, a particular thing, and not even considered, those things from what the board has prior approved. The way that this cut will work is from a holistic standpoint, function level. So we'll look at each function and cut 7%, and it may include a technology implication, it may not. It depends on what we're advised.
I use that for a hypothetical.
Okay.
My real question is, if it needed the board's approval to purchase, will it be presented to the board as a cut?
We'll discuss, and based upon our findings, if that's the best option, then under advisement of the superintendent and our staff, that's what we'll look at. All right.
Thank you, Ms. Austin.
Yes, sir. Any other questions, concerns about operation cuts?
Let me make sure I'm understanding his question.
Sure.
Ask your question again, Mr. Harrison. Make sure I understand your question.
My question was, if it needed the board's approval to bring into the district, will it need the board's approval to dismiss from the district?
If there's anything that needs the board approval, it will always have to have the board approval. We can't cut anything that needs the board approval. If it meets the regulation to have board approval.
My question to Ms. Austin was, what qualifies it to meet that? That's why I phrased the question as.
What, the 25,000 threshold? Is that the question?
Yes.
That may be what he's referencing.
Okay. So part of board policy, if we have that threshold, of course it has to be approved. And we look at, and then it depends on the implication of that approval. If it's for a contract over a certain period of time, it can be anything of that nature. We have to really look at it. And if it's something that we're approved, then we would try to say, hey, we may be considered, not doing this, and we have to bring that back to the board because it was the board approved, so we have to ensure the board is a privilege to that information. Because you gave us the opportunity to have it. I feel like it'd be the best thing, in best interest for us to bring that conversation back to you.
And with the example that he gave, I think most of the time, even things that are not that meet that threshold, most of the time I bring most things to the board, even when it doesn't even meet that threshold.
Correct.
Well, my question too, the things that we've already approved, that was for 1920. This cut of what we're talking about is for 2021. Is that correct? Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So at this point, we're not looking at cutting what was already allocated for 1920, just moving forward.
Moving forward.
Okay.
We used last year as the baseline, and that's where we started moving things from.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. All right. And so the next aspect, we talked about salary allocation and nutrition. Of course, individuals who resign, non-renewals, things of that nature, or reallocation of duties or reassignments to federal funds or whatever have you, was able to realize that cost savings. Look at the CARES fund, since that was a part of the relief that the federal government and passed through to the state, has allowed us to recognize some of those dollars, which we're still looking at based upon what we decide to do with what option. Depending on what amount the CARES Act, we're working through that budget. But if we were to use some to help offset the cost, which the CARES Act allows for that, in this particular scenario, it would be $50,000.
From the CARES Act?
Yes, sir. Which would be that itemization of offsetting or the continuity of programs, PL, things of that nature. And so, of course, that amount will be inclusive in a more broad budget that we're working through. And in this particular option, we say, we have to the good $77,714.18, which gives us a good cushion and a margin of error for any unexpected changes.
So what I understand you're saying, Mr. Austin, a 14% reduction, or actually 15%, are you talking about, well, 14% reduction from our budget,
Yes.
609,000.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so where would that come from? So you're saying this is one option that we can consider,
Yes, ma'am.
is a 3-day calendar cut,
Yes, ma'am.
in addition to 7% operational cut across the board,
Mhm.
the salary reallocation and attrition,
Mhm.
and the 50,000 from the CARES fund,
Mhm.
and that total will make $687,000 in that amount. And that would be one way that we could manage the 14% cut.
Yes,
Okay.
that's great.
Making sure I have it right in my mind, thank you.
And that will be the format going forward as well. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Any questions or comments, concerns about option one before we move to the second one? All right, Sebastian. So option two, scenario. So millage increase not applicable in this particular option. The reduction in the calendar 5 days, which will yield $109,749.23. The operational cut is standard. Salary allocation is standard, as we talked about in the last option. This particular option does not consider the CARES Act being allocated in this particular model. And just to note, we did receive $400,376 in CARES Act. And the savings for this particular, or to our good, over our deficit needs is $72,028.87, which gives us the same margin of error and cushion that we need for any unexpected changes.
Why would you not use the CARES fund on this one?
The last option, we had 3 calendar days that we looked at. This option considers 5. So since we had added more in one category, we decided to say, well, in the event that we needed to reallocate more funding to something else, we don't touch the CARES Act. Not a particular reason that it does not help, but it's just another option to consider if we decided to do something different.
Just giving different options, and you utilizing different things, as you can see as we go
Yeah,
forward.
I was looking at this, the savings over was greater with the 3 days, and I guess that was because of the 50,000 from the CARES fund.
A combination of what the calendar model did and some of what the CARES Act did as well. Because I think on the first option we had 77
Yeah,
in savings, and this one 72.
right.
So it really was based upon the increase in the calendar days. Yes, sir.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. So I'm saying we cut more calendar days and we had less savings though. And that is because of the CARES Act.
We took 50,000, I think, from the CARES Act
Right.
in number 1,
Right.
and we did not take any from the CARES Act in this one. And had we taken some from the CARES Act here, we could have had more savings here, like you're saying.
Yeah, cause we increased days
Right,
on the second one. We went from 3 to 5.
correct.
Mm-hmm.
And if we put some in from, and what we were trying to do in the options to show, if you use some CARES, if you don't use some CARES.
Okay, all right.
That's what we was just trying to show, some
Yes.
different scenarios of what you're doing, as well as we're still bringing back to you, a budget for the CARES Act. So we don't have a set that this is what we will use, just options. Yes, sir. With the opportunity for you all to come back and say, this is what we will want to do.
And it gave us $45,000 more by having the 2 extra days. So again, the need for the CARES Act wasn't applicable to this particular model. Yes, sir.
It's just looking like, the cut days with the, if we cut days with our 12-month employees, around the book from here, starting at the district office and moving to them, I think that the days cut would be the best option. I'm saying, we're leaving it off, I still think we need to add it.
Any other comments or concerns or questions about this particular option? moving on to third one. Alright. So in this particular option, millage increase is not considered, calendar or reduction of the calendar is not considered. Operational cuts, salary reallocation, and attrition are standard things. And the CARES Act is considered in this particular model at $100,000. And that gives us a savings of 2 hour goods, $62,284.64. Any questions or concerns about this particular model? All right. Moving forward to the next one. 4. All right, so in this one, we consider a millage increase of a half meal. A half meal in our district, based upon our 2019 tax digest, generates $176,404.71. It does not consider a calendar cut. It does consider operation again and salary reallocation, and it does not consider CARES. But you notice that we have more savings with this particular model of $138,725 to the good. So that's the big difference in this one, that it actually considers a half a meal increase. Any questions or concerns about this one?
I feel before we do any millage increase that we definitely need to look at cuts among the district. We definitely don't want to furlough, but we do want to make sure that.
Any other thoughts?
Mr. Also, this is in addition, because we still have our fund balance. So this is in addition to what would already be in our fund balance, what the projected amount in our fund balance would be. I mean, relatively speaking.
Yes, ma'am. The fund balance is not considered in this equation.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
that's our 3-5 year down the road. We don't know what happens type deal.
Right.
We want to protect it if we can.
Okay. Okay. So this is still protecting the fund balance.
That still protects our fund
May not
balance.
add anything. Well, it may add anything to it if we don't have any unexpected
Any unexpected things that
changes.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
What, just for information, on a half meal, what would a half meal increase do like to a property?
$100,000.
$100,000 property, talking about adding $20 a year, about $1.60 a month, more to what's already originally paid.
How much is it?
$20 a year, $1.60 a month per taxpayer that falls in that category with a property assessed value of $100,000.
So if my property was assessed at $60,000,
$60,000, $12 per year, $1 a month.
Basically 0.2 or 2%. 0.2%.
And if it's on the low end at $40, $8 a year, and about 40
$40,000.
at 66 cents a month.
We haven't had a millage increase since what, 2012, is that?
it was before I came.
Yeah.
I think we did a rollback the first year. To where we are now. And if you recall, this year was supposed to be a budget neutral year with us. So that's where we were scheduled to be this year.
Correct. So as things develop, you know, even from the local side, I stay in constant communication with our tax commissioner, being very gracious and keeping me abreast of any changes or information as it relates to this. So, you know, we're trying to keep our finger on that post as well, as it relates to taxes. Any other questions and concerns about option 4, any of the options before we look at any of the appendixes or supporting documents?
Mr. Austin, I think someone asked this, but I just wanna reiterate the question, and they may not have asked, I might have inferred it from another answer or response that you gave. In reference to operational costs, what is a itemized statement of operational look like?
If I'm interpreting your question correctly, itemized in meaning what type of, for example, if that consists of supplies,
Correct.
and you're asking.
So let me rephrase since maybe I shouldn't use the word itemized.
What falls in that category?
But I use the term itemized because I wanted to know in detail what falls in that function.
Okay. So that's okay. So if we look at, let's give an example. 2500 function. That's the business finance function.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that's in that particular function is contracted services. Okay. One of those things, we know we have to have something for Martin and Jenkins who come and do our financial statements, prepare those particular things, those items. We may look at travel. There's a lot of conferences that I may have to go to, or that payroll have to go to for HR, things of that nature. So if you see a 2500, 580 for travel, in that could be any particular thing that relates to us going somewhere for professional learning. If that's answering your question.
So every department in some sense has operational costs that pulls from their operational budget.
Yes, because the way the charter accounts flows is we're talking about objects. You look at object 1 and 2, that's salaries, 1, 2 is benefits, right? If you look at 3 through 8, those are operations. 3, your contract service. 4 is rentals, water, utilities. 5 is things for communication, paying your phone bill. 6, supplies, technology, software. 7 is capital assets. 8 is other expenditures and dues and fees. And 9 are other things that are not necessarily coded in that area. So in every particular function has those objects which names what they could possibly have for operational uses.
Absolutely. Thank you for the breakdown. Hence back to my original question, itemized. I think if we could see it itemized from every department of what their operational function looks like to add to show how do we get $186,000, $226. I think that's my point.
And that number is based upon each function. The total budget is 7% of what the budget was for last year. So Absolutely. If it's 400,000, 7% of that, whatever that yields, that's what that number makes up. And it's only affecting 23, 24, 25, 26, and 27.
So in essence, it's hard to answer a question about a budget that we've never seen. So when I ask in detail per department, if we don't know a department's amount for the budget, overall, in addition to what their operational fees are occurring, it's hard for a board to vote on a budget that if we cut operations,
sure.
When it's allocated to those departments, superintendent along with yourself as CFO, you make decisions of how to appropriate those funds based on what was given.
This budget, what we're basing this cuts off of is the budget that was approved last year.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Going forward, once again, how do we make a sound decision not knowing what those departments actually utilize?
And that's something we continue to work through. Because if you notice, going back to the budget calendar, we had a lot of things that were submitted in the perfect scenario, which we was going to take under advisement. And one of the most important things we failed to intervene was the pause, look at what the state was gonna possibly give us, have this conversation, and talk with our department heads on, you know, and I've been talking with operations, I've talked to technology, I've talked to instructional people, and say, hey, with the cut, and even in the memo that I originally stated, I listed it, look at different scenarios. So waiting for that information so we can have a holistic approach.
Absolutely.
And then once we come with a tentative budget, things like that, you will start seeing some of what that cut may look like.
Absolutely.
So that department will have responsibility.
And that's a smart approach. I think what I'm diving a little deeper into is I'm familiar with budget cuts, and with morale and climate, so on and so forth. If we made a decision to choose a plan and it entail deep operational cuts,
Sure.
I'm pretty sure there will be some department that will receive more operational funding than another that may have been an issue prior to this. So what budget cuts do is bring out the conversation of something that has already been an issue.
I can understand that.
The conversation is, again, we would love to see what each department head is spending in operational funding.
Sure. I got you. That's something that-
And as the department heads met on we've been meeting, but we met in depth, as we were preparing for this. One of the main things that we've all come to an agreement with is travel, is one of the main areas that we've all come to an agreement with, that we know that's one of the things
2 years ago.
that we. And that's a major for the part that we said that we, tough times call for tough decisions.
With the calendar cut, the 5 days, is that gonna be for all the whole district?
As of right now, yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's including here, there,
Yes, ma'am.
That's one option.
okay, this is option 2.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. I know, of course, there's models that you can tier it out, there's different scenarios, but historically, I think we've done it across the board. We've had furlough days in the past. When I mean across the board, from 12-month, 11-month, 10-month, even down to our 9-month employees.
And there are some districts who have tiered it, like if you're 12 months, you had this many. If you're 11 months, you had this many. If you're,
Yeah, I know,
like you were saying.
I talked to a couple of districts that are doing their 12-month employees, they're starting at the district office first. You know, then they're doing all their 12-month employees. So I thought that was a great idea.
And unfortunately, some of those districts have more
Larger,
days. You know,
yeah.
we have 240 days, you know, with some of our neighbors.
And that's another thing, if we can
Yes, ma'am.
cut maybe some of our days, I know that will save us a lot too. We go to like 212 or.
Ours
You know,
Ours is not as, we don't get the bang for our buck because of our days already being so much less. Most 12-month people are already 240, and we don't have any at 240. Our 12-month is 226.
Yeah, 226.
So when we did cuts years ago, we never restored ours back to that 240 level.
So it's harder for us to take, you know, data. We can take the approach, but it's just a little more complicated because of that scenario. Yes, ma'am.
Just like,
I'm sorry, even when the teachers come back for the planning day, you know, usually they come up like 5 days, is
Yes,
that
ma'am.
right?
Posted
It's
briefly.
10,
Pre-10,
10, 5 before
10
5 after.
professionals.
Yeah, I mean, that could save us too, if we can look at that, you know, for us.
what do you mean can save us?
I'm
Yeah.
saying if they don't come in 10, maybe they can cut down, does it take 10, you think, for them to get prepared?
I think it takes more than
Yeah.
10.
It
Much
does?
more
It
than
takes, your good teachers
Mhm.
are here all the time. And the job's gonna get done
You're
anyway. And, it's an insult, in my
Okay.
opinion, to cut.
To have them less days to come in, okay, I'm just thinking.
In my opinion, if we gonna do the days cut, if we go that way, it best to me, is you cut everybody equally, you know what I'm saying? That way, like I say,
Yes,
you know, administrator all the way down to teacher, everybody, that way, everybody feels something, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's just my opinion,
For your certified staff.
I can see that. For everybody, for
everybody.
all staff, right? This is talking about all
This
staff.
time all staff.
Yeah, you got, I mean, this to ensure that you keep a job.
Absolutely.
If it came down to me taking some days and keeping me a job, I would keep my job.
then to keep them furloughed.
Yeah, keep, you know, losing my job. See anybody go home, you know? Some people might end up staying, somebody have to go home, so.
I know we're in a budget workshop, Superintendent Dixon and Mr. Austin. Will we have another opportunity outside of this current sitting or seating to overview our options for this 14% reduction, or upon
Confirming, yes, sir.
okay? So we will have another opportunity
Yes, sir.
to make, because we are here.
This is only the information.
Absolutely,
Mhm.
and because we're only discussing the cut, the reduction. I don't have my calendar in front of me. What was the date for our first public hearing for the budget approval?
Well, you
for
know,
budget hearing.
all that has now been rearranged by the state's cut,
Okay,
you know, so our calendar, we've got to revisit that because our original set date, because we have not been delivered our numbers from the state.
however,
So-
that fiscal year start date did not change.
No, the physical year start date, but we can submit for a spending resolution, to have going forward rather than meeting that, initial, deadline.
Is that something that you're considering and not meeting that July 1 deadline?
We can do a spending resolution and not meet that initial, if we need to work through this. That's not a abnormal thing.
In reference to work through this, we speaking in reference to the 14% reduction. Cause there's nothing really much more to kind of consider.
Well, how to approach it and what the tentative budget may be.
Well, yeah, you mean the reduction.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't think we'll have a lot of.
And the only thing that I would, the discussion that we need to do is that, remember that we changed some things in our contract language, with our contracted employees. And I think it's only fair to them that we, have discussions and we be as upfront with them as expeditiously as possible, so they can make a conscious decision, by some deadlines that's set in our contract, because we did make some changes this year, in our contracts.
So what will we approach with our contract right now? Those changes that were made are new changes, you mean?
With our contract, the dates that we put in place, as it relates to when, we would let people out without penalty.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
That's a concern now because of what?
In regards to if, I would like to remain, with a district who is in furlough, who is not in a calendar reduction of days, because that affects, my home, my pay, teachers make those decisions based upon where I'm going to work and where I will be. Did I make sense when I answered that? Yeah, based upon the information, they do like to have that information. And sometimes it may not be information to make because everybody may be in the same boat.
Everybody's gonna be in the same boat.
Everybody may be in the same
I
boat.
think they are.
We are in the same boat. Everybody's getting
We're in the same
14%.
storm.
Everybody got 14%, but some districts have the fund balance to be able not to. We've got some options that we may not have to. Some districts have, the option that they may not, go into any furloughs, they may not go into any calendar reduction days. So that's just so, they can make informed decisions.
my personal, just as my personal opinion, would be option 1 or option 3. And I know you say that a millage increase would only be $20 per 100,000. I just can't see asking the taxpayers to support that when we haven't cut every way that we can and used all the funds available to us to help with that. That would just be my personal opinion. I don't agree with that. That's just my personal
I'm gonna agree with you wholeheartedly.
Okay.
Here's where the frustration sits in real fast. It's hard for us to make cuts in places that we cannot see.
You just
I
want
can't
to see
give you-
more about that operational, that's what you're,
I can't make a sound decision on 1 through 4. I do know that our community may not want to see a millage increase. I do know that. Conversations with, your district, my district, whose district. But that's that. That's that.
Mr. Simmons there. Mr. Simmons. At the part of your district, my district may not wanna see.
A millage increase. Yeah, they may not want to see a millage increase, and I respect that. I do understand that. If we had to do a millage increase, I agree. But her point was we hadn't cut everybody who we could cut. We hadn't cut in places. We can't make cuts in places we can't see. So I think there is a little bit more.
no, what I was saying is to not skip over these cuts that have already been proposed
I got your
and
point.
do away with those and say, well, let's just get it from the taxpayer.
Absolutely.
We're not adding anything to the value, we're not adding, we're cutting.
Right.
So,
I think I'm adding on to extend your point. For my clarity and understanding, it will be hard to make a cut within our organization, and I just don't feel like we may be granted the information in front of us to make a sound decision off of the plan to take when there are some areas of concern.
well, so Mr. Harris, what you're asking is more about what that operational cut, what it would look like almost. Is that what you're asking about?
I would have to know what that looked
Yeah.
like.
What more information about what that operational cut is?
I could not vote not knowing what the operational cut looks like
Really more.
because tying our hands, but tying department chairs or department heads' hands, and they're not gonna come to us. They're gonna go to the superintendent, and he's gonna say that's what the board voted on, and that's true. That is what the board voted on. However, if given the full extent and severity of every department, some of those are already struggling. Making a 7% cut across the board wouldn't be fair for departments who we're seeking funds to add to the little of nothing budget. So some people wouldn't hurt in the organization with that small cut. So I think it's looking. We trust Mr. Austin to do the job that he does, and he does it well. But we go into question what makes good sense for the district at large, and maybe we need to review our current budget. Maybe we need to see what funds have been spent, what working funds are, what's tentative, what has been exhausted from those, what do we have left over, considering that school was interrupted. There's just some mitigating circumstances that need to be reviewed prior to making a sound decision on a plan going forward for a 14% reduction. We don't have a choice in that reduction. That has to happen. Mr. Austin questioned us is how are we going to do it. Mr. Dixon questioned us is how will we proceed with that reduction, and is that the right place to cut? Calendar days, I get that. But operational cuts, that may have to be. It may be inevitable not to make that cut. But can we not make that cut and still save our departments? And the 3-day cut, the 5-day cut for all employees, I get it. 3-5 days, I get that. That can happen. the millage increase, that may not hurt us, may not hurt many of our stakeholders. It's just, I think it's a conversation we don't like to have about millage increase. There's a negative connotation that goes along with millage increases. That's just what we are.
I do think of, we have to take a historical look. Back in 2012, when we went through some tough times of this nature, we had something like this hit, and then we got hit that next year with austerity cuts. And as superintendent, I must just at least warn this board, we can get through next year. We can make it through this coming year. But I don't want you guys to be sitting here after next year looking at this budget thinking we should have made or looked down the road a little further. Because, and I can't say that that will happen, but if y'all remember, those austerity cuts happened in the middle of the year when the state chose to pull those funds back and didn't send us that money that year. And that made things really, really, really tough. And it really put this district in a tough spot. And it took us a long time to come out of that hole. And I don't want to see us go back into that hole. That's one of the things that's kind of hanging over us. We don't know the unknown. And I get that, so we've just got a lot of stuff to ponder over the next couple weeks. And with that, nobody likes to see millage increase. I'm not coaching for that, but we have been good stewards of the monies that have been given to us. We got a good track record. We can show what we've done. But if it's for the boys and girls of Twiggs County, if that was the thing that would have to happen, if the board deemed that necessary, I think we could have the data to show that this is why we would propose that. I do think we would have some funds that we could put towards this effort that we would not add towards the fund balance this year, that we may not expend because of school being interrupted this year. So there are some things that we have to have some discussions about. We can provide more information in regards to what is in that operational cost, operational area.
Was asking for just more information, what the operational cuts.
Yes, that can definitely be provided there. But as we go through it, I just think we just got to have some time to massage it, get into it. Mr. Austin can provide that for us, of what that really looks like in layman's terms, so you can make some informed decisions.
One thing in reference to the historical approach look is that's very smart and wise, Superintendent Dixon. A little bit before my time, but I do know that we struggled somewhere back then. I think what helps us going forward in reference to the unknown is proper projections. If we project what our next year will look like, we never know what the state will do. We didn't anticipate a 14% reduction. We knew that there would be a reduction. However, I think in the area of finances, looking at the projection of the our district at large, our number of students we service, K through 12, our projections, what are the numbers looking like? Who's coming? Who's going? Our retention rates for students as well as faculty and staff. In addition to that, having more data to make sound decision, which is what Ms. Rainey was just talking about, having more data is the key to making the sound decision on choosing any one of these options. In addition to that, in reference to saying, yes, we have interruption of our school year, of our calendar year. In saying that, there were things interrupted that we didn't exhaust from our fund balance. I'm pretty sure there are some other areas that we saved some money in. We need to see those things. If we can see $10,000 added back in the fund balance, that may be $10,000 we can add to some of these other monies, because we would have otherwise spent them annually. But the board didn't travel this year. We had allocated funds for state, national. Those are funds that come out of our general budget, our general fund balance. Those are things we need to look at and see where we saved this fiscal year. In addition to what that may look like going into our next fiscal year. In addition to that, we can look at some other areas of concern once we see the data presented to us. But it's just hard to pick a plan when you don't know. Hard to drive a car if you don't know it's automatic or 5-speed. It's preference. So the millage rate, as I inferred, I know you said you weren't making a recommendation that may be what that is. I'm not opposed to a millage rate, let me say that also. However, I do understand that our county just hates that terminology of a millage rate. And if it's in the essence of education, I think we should do everything necessary to have a balanced budget for what our students need. And my talking is increased because I think many times, this has been approached before, we make decisions based off of what's presented, not necessarily what is necessary. We need to look at the whole equation to get an answer, to get a real answer. And it's up to us to ask questions about further documentation or data to make sound decisions on this information that definitely affects the entire district from the top to the bottom.
And I think if you would look into your packet, Ms. Dawson, and I think it's very important that we do go and talk about the allotment sheet, the last allotment sheet that we received, because I think it's very important that we talk about the number of teachers that we earn, the number of teachers that we have, and we discussed that on yesterday and we went through that. Let's talk about that.
All right, so what you see before you is what we are waiting for the state to provide. This is what the General Assembly votes on. This is the state qualitative basic education allotment at midterm with the adjustments that the state has made. So if we just take for an example, I know it's kind of hard to see up there, but I think your package is a little more visible. The elementary grades, for example, on the left side where it says direct instructional costs, each category reference the category that a student may fall in based upon the age appropriation and grade level. To the very far right, on the earned positions, where it says teacher, past the bolded line, it shows how many teachers that we're actually earning based upon this formula. It's based upon the FTE count, and if things are coded properly, it will give us the ability to maximize funding in each of those categories, which have different weights. So this is a very important point for us. And so if you look at, let's just give an example, the primary grade 1 through 3. We have 7.65 teachers that we earn. And you probably think, well, how can you earn 0.65 teachers? Well, that's when we start looking at your 49%ers, people doing half, day things, something of that nature. This is where we get into that. But one of the good things that we've noted, especially at this particular level, is that the allotment sheet accounts for 19.34 students at teachers, at the elementary level that we actually earn this allotment. When we actually looked at how many teachers that we have for that are contracting, that are in position, it's 18. So we are looking at approaches in that standpoint, not only to maximize funding, but to ensure that we stay within the realms of what the QB allotment suggests and say that it's funded for. And this is pretty much our guiding light, going back to projections, going back to, where we are. We really look at this as guidance on how we look for next year. So any questions or concerns with just the functionality of this and kind of what we're looking at?
To show what we earn from the state, what we have employed, to show that we're not having any fat hanging around.
Yeah.
To help us with that.
Does this show the administrative as well?
Yes.
Of how many we earn through the state for administrative positions?
Some of the administrative
Versus
positions
how
are
many
listed.
we actually employ as well?
Yes, ma'am. Some of that is there as well.
Because that would be an interesting thing to know all across the board for our entire district.
Yes, ma'am.
And if we are going to cut the fat with if we have extra teachers that we're not earning, we need to also make sure we definitely don't have the administration as well. Because really what makes it happen is that teacher in that classroom working with those children.
Absolutely.
Yes, you need good administrators. Yes, we want them. They're wonderful. We want all the support services. But where it really happens is when that classroom closes and that teacher is in that classroom with the students. So.
Ms. Rainey, can you reiterate your question to Mr. Austin? He answered it, but can you restate your question?
I'm just asking because this does show how many teachers and
right.
how many that we earn per QBE. So
right.
This is how many students you have and this is how many teachers.
Correct.
And we do right now have more teachers hired than we have allocated for.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have more teachers
mm-hmm.
than you have allocated for, the difference comes out of your general funds.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that. We've got to make sure we don't have more teachers,
mm-hmm.
but that's got to be the same with administrative and support services as well.
And Mr. Austin, your answer to her question in reference to administrators listed there, your answer was what again?
The administrators that are there, we have, and some of them, of course, by title are not up there.
So Mr. Austin's response to your question was some of them are listed.
Some of them are listed, but it would be better to have all. We need to know all of the information for that as well.
This formula is what the state deems
Stands.
appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't fund everything.
They don't fund everything,
mm-hmm.
and even
the state doesn't fund. QB is not fully funded.
Right. It's not, and then you have to do that 5 or 7% share, fair share, or something like that.
QB is not fully.
So you're looking at you're looking at the same situation in not real time, in different timing. His response was some of it is listed there. Let's see what's not listed. That answers the question on making a sound decision on where we pull trim fat. We can't look at our concern at large is not what the state is doing. Our concern is what we're pulling out of our fund balance. So who are we offsetting out of the general fund that the state doesn't qualify or say deem us necessary to have that meeting? That's the question that we should be asking. What do we not see? We see what we see. We comprehend what we see. I do. I think the board does.
I think that's a good statement you made right now. As far as to see what we paying, as far as the state, yeah, they gonna pay what they pay. But to see what we're paying will make a difference.
and some of the positions are federally funded as far as other administrative positions because of the nature of the program. And we have been good stewards in making sure that if an individual in a leadership role that may not have much state support, that we ensure that we have that combated with federal dollars. So that's something that we have been doing quite well from that.
I understand that, and I agree with that part, but back to like what he said,
Sure.
not the federal, not the state, but what the local paying.
And that's honestly all the positions that are up there. We Yeah, I think
Say, for instance, like it says on the allotment sheet, I think what we're getting at is like on the allotment sheet, it says 2 assistant superintendents. Well, we don't have, you know, at one time we had 2 assistant superintendents, but we didn't deem it that we need 2 assistant superintendents. But those positions is spread out. It doesn't list out a director of finance there. But in that, you're supposed to have, you got to have a finance person. So that you would take that, one of those positions to use for your finance person.
Well, I understand, I ain't got no problem with that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying that's
But
how
the one
that.
that is not being paid by the federal or the state and coming from the county, that's what you were saying, right?
We got 3 questions in one.
Yeah.
That one,
The local funds.
Right.
The local funding. That was one question. The second question you said in reference to what we qualify for. Okay, so cool. We're talking about what we meet and what we're eligible for or what we receive from the state. And we often talk about what we're actually getting at is we're talking about what classes earn full-time or part-time teachers. We talk about we hire somebody for 49% or 49.5% and in areas that really possibly do qualify for a full-time teacher, or are we putting full-time teachers in class sizes that only earn enough to have a part-time person? That's where the additional funds are draining our fund balance. Okay. I reiterate. Well, no, I won't reiterate. I stand on what I just said. Let me add to that. We need to look at all of the positions that we have in the district that are fully funded out of our general fund balance.
Yeah.
And this over here, that chart does tell, I mean, it tells a good bit because it says 1 superintendent, 2 assistants, and then it goes through. It goes through that. Now, like you said, I'm not sure if it tells everything, but it does tell what we do earn here, this little chart.
It tells
Well,
what we
I wanna
earn.
get back- I
It don't
wanna
tell
go
who we paying.
Right, well, that's, you know.
But
we
I
have
wanna go back,
salaries.
I wanna go back to Mr. Harris's,
It does tell.
statement. Because unless can you address what he's saying?
If we go back to the teachers, make sure I'm hearing this right. You're talking about some teachers are in classrooms that may not have enough students to even have a full-time teacher. We have a full-time teacher that we're not earning money for.
That's one question. Yeah, that was one question.
Okay.
We have a teacher that we're not earning money for.
So let's say if we have
No, that wasn't the question.
5 students in the classroom, there really should be 15 to 20. And you have a full-time teacher teaching 5 kids, but we don't have enough kids generating enough money to fund that teacher. And that's draining the money, is what he's asking. And what he's getting at is that we're not maximizing class size to max.
And I
Are the
would think-
classes we're teaching, are the classes we're offering maximized to receive funding from the state for full-time employment?
And then sometimes you get caught with that because you might have 45 students in 2nd grade. So, or you might have 35 students in 2nd grade. Well, you might earn maybe a teacher and a half for 2nd grade, but it's not realistic to be putting 35 students in one 2nd grade classroom. So that's why you would hire another 2nd grade teacher. So you do get kind of caught with that sometimes. And especially when you're teaching Title I students, the class size really does matter. One question that I have, are there going to be, I mean, and we probably don't know this yet, but we need to be thinking about how is school going to look when we do start back? Is it just going to be business as usual? I know Mr. Bacon touched at our last meeting about the cleaning and that kind of thing, but is there going to be a distance restriction? And is there going to be a limit to how many students in the classroom? How is that even going to look? And the state hasn't given any guidance about that yet, but then they're going to give us a 14% cut, but then you're not telling us what we're going to have to do in August when the students start back. Just completely
It's not
unfair.
even, really, they're not really telling you that, we're
No.
gonna actually start back in August.
Right, that you can even
I
start
They
back
don't-
in
they don't
August.
really
I'm
understand
trying to keep
everything, but they
saying
do
parallel
understand this, the way I
That's
You
what
better
understand
cut,
it.
you cut
Is
that
that
14%.
we gonna
That's
cut.
right, Mike, that's
And,
right.
and as Mr. Dixon said earlier, to look down the road,
We don't know.
you need to look farther than next year,
Mhm.
because the
Mhm.
government,
Mhm.
they giving out money and they losing money right now.
But
But
eventually that's.
eventually, that money got to come
It's gonna
back
be recouped
somewhere.
somewhere.
So, you know, we can plan for it now, or we can hurt for it later. I mean, yeah, I'm not campaigning for neither one right now, but, like I said, you gotta look further than.
You gotta look further than
three-
next year.
Yeah, you gotta look 3 to 5 years out,
Mhm.
because
Projections.
anybody that done lived in the United States know that this money that been given out and the money that it's coming, somebody got to pay it back.
Take that, it's not free, that's
And,
right.
and we gonna be here, so.
Mhm.
Yes, sir.
But now, to piggyback on what Mr. Harris was saying too, and I'm not necessarily saying like, as, Ms. Rainey was saying with the 35 kids, I understand teaching a half, but I ain't trying to tell nobody how to do the job, but we need to look at some of the teacher planning hours, cause you know, we probably got some teachers that I know probably had 2, 3 planning hours.
Because they didn't have a class that
That's
period.
right.
Yeah, and that's no return on my money. I mean, I understand
Wasted
you need a
time.
planning hour, but you got 3 hours planning period,
That's true,
you know?
and I'm thinking on the
Well,
elementary.
and Superintendent,
I went out there one morning,
Elementary.
and one just had the light off,
Mhm.
so they didn't have a period, so,
Your statement last week was relevant. You said
yeah.
everybody will have to do 2 things.
Mhm.
There will not be any people, you know, just we can't afford to employ people who are only able to service us in one aspect. And that's what we're looking at. And by all means, let me say this, Ms. Rainey, if a teacher who we have and they can't manage 35 students in a rural district like Twiggs, they probably shouldn't work here. No way. 10 more students.
You
No,
had 35, I'm sorry, I highly disagree with you on that.
35.
I'm
If the
told.
budget says that,
Then
And we
you
cannot-
do
and
what
we-
you have to do, but it's,
I think you'd be.
No one wants to
I think
see-
you'd be hurting the students.
no one wants to see 35
You are
students.
hurting
Yeah,
students.
35.
Nobody
is
wants to see 35. Nobody wants to see
Right.
20. Honestly,
Right.
you don't want to see 20,
Right.
more than 20.
Right.
However,
and then.
when you look at your funds,
Mhm.
and that's what we can maintain, and we can put a teacher and a half should be able to maintain 35 students.
Well, I could, you
Period.
know, but I just.
That's just hypotheticals. We run
I've done
to
it.
close out, you know, opportunities and options, but it just is what it is. When we look at this and we see what we qualify and what the state's giving, that's really not impressive. That's kind of like, oh, we're in a clutch. So where do we make decisions based on the need of the child?
Start with what Mr. Rouse is saying, and let's look at those people who do only have the 5 students in the classroom and are being employed, if we have any of those. If we do have.
Yeah, I don't know we got them now,
Not
but that's
having
something to look
the,
at.
longer planning times and that kind of thing, and not having students all day.
And there are some programs that sometimes we don't have any control over with that, like ROTC. There are some guidelines that come with them that say that they have to have a dual planning or something, you know, with that. So if it, you know, if sometimes if there's a program restriction with something, but
Yeah, we
there's
don't have
not
no programs to even.
there's not many programs like that.
Right.
Yeah, I understand if the
We don't have many
If there's a program guideline restriction or something, but there's not many. We don't have many like that. So
I'm just saying that's something to look at.
Right.
I don't actually know.
yes, sir.
But, you know, you look for ways, I
Everybody's
look for
gotta
ways
make
to save
sure.
money. You know
Yes,
what I'm
sir.
saying?
Being efficient, absolutely. Okay, do we have some more discussion? Anything else? What is the next- what
But
are the
I
next
would say
steps?
that that's worth, you know, looking at as we just look at that. And we also just provided you just a historical tax digest history in there in your packet as well. And I just think it's just some good information to mull over and to look over, and we'll continue in with the discussions.
Well,
on what we've got.
and thank you for that, Sue. The information that has been provided to us on tonight is not enough information to make a sound decision on option 1 through 4. So here are my questions and recommendations and the things that I would need to make a sound decision. Number 1, I think we need to preview, and I know we have this, I know I have it for the past 3 years, but Mr. Austin, we'd like to see the overall budget for the past 3 years, in addition to the operational cost at large for the past 3 years. Our trending numbers for those 2 aspects, in addition to what funding was left over from any of our budgets in the past 3 years. Did we plan high, move low? Did we plan low, went over budget? I want to see where we're trending within the past 3 years, so that we can make a sound decision on where these cuts may need to come from. And without that information, we're just making an off the cuff decision. And you can include within that, we had some question on the millage rate, and Ms. Blackshear said it was 2012. Superintendent Dixon said it was just before he got here. If we can see that millage rate increase, what year did that millage rate increase take place, and what was indeed the millage rate amount?
Does anybody else have any other questions? What would be the next steps from this? What's our next? We have another public hearing.
So we don't have any public hearing scheduled until we get into the point of approving the tentative budget.
Okay.
So the budget calendar had tentatively put us in a position to have approved for advertisement this month of a tentative budget, which will move those steps to June, to next month. So next step will be to address these issues, which this meeting was to have those conversations, in hopes that we have some guidance on what you would like to see, and we did accomplish that. So that will be the next thing to present, and from that, we'll build out a tentative skeleton of what the budget would look like based upon the recommendation of scenarios that we choose.
Mr. Austin, you're a very smart guy, and I appreciate that aspect. I'm pretty sure your budget is already almost pretty much done for this fiscal. The budget that you would present to us is done. In all actuality, we need to see the budget that you were going to present to us prior to making reductions to a budget that we're just going to propose to the board and then accept. It would be hard not to make a decision based off of 14% reduction without seeing the proposed budget that we were going towards anyway, not basing our decision off of the previous fiscal year budget.
Did you have that already?
So yes and no. No, because at that time we still didn't have the state numbers, and normally I finalize what stuff look like in March. That projection comes out in March. So of course we worked through the budget calendar, and in April would have been more, but we still have some approval of personnel at the time as well. So some of those things wasn't finished up, and that's the biggest part of my budget. So yes, the skeleton of what I would input, the model, all that was prepared, but I still had a couple of key items that was not readily available before the shift.
And in interruption, yeah.
Yes, sir.
That's understandable.
So nothing at our next meeting then? We have anything at our next?
We'll continue this type
Continue
of
this
discussion.
part, okay. Does anybody else have any other questions
We'll
of what-
provide more information
about
of
that?
what we've been asked for tonight and continue with the same kind of discussion.
Does anybody else want to ask for any other information for next Tuesday?
just something that it's not that important to me, but I know that we pay a lot for light bill, stuff like that, and I just wonder how much did we actually save the couple months? I mean, just curiosity, you know what I'm saying? On utilities, you know, how much did shut down help and hurt?
Anything, Ms. Lexia?
No, the same thing that, Mr. Harris was saying, I just like a breakdown of the operational cuts, of what it consists of, that would be great. And since this one is, the salary, can we get, for the 386 savings?
Yes,
Could we kind of get a breakdown of what that is too,
yes.
since it's a large amount?
And one question I have, because I know that the state puts mandates on ways that we spend, like the travel and like the required conferences and things like that, we have to, that's just one example. But if the state's gonna cut that, then we should be able to file some sort of waiver. If you're gonna cut our budget that much, then we should not be responsible. You need to give us a little bit of leeway in those things. Like when we did the strategic waivers and we had some flexibility in our class sizes and some different flexibilities, we need more flexibility in those requirements as well. If you're gonna cut our budget, you're not gonna fund it, but you're still gonna make the requirements. Now, customarily, they say you have to make the, you have to make the cuts anyway, we're not gonna fund it, but that would be something.
Unfunded mandates.
Unfunded mandates, and then cut, but we're gonna require the same mandates.
Well, I think some good discussion, tonight. I think our goal was achieved to, if we didn't start somewhere with something to look at to address, where we go, we will never get to where we need to be. So, thank you, Mr. Austin, and the team for coming together to look at, some options. And we will see where we go.
Okay.
Madam Chair, that concludes what we have.
Their motion to adjourn,
We'll make the motion.
seconded,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Ralph. Raise your hand, that motion carries unanimously. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.